In this video, I'll be running through how to approach scaling B2C and B2B based e-commerce brands. Now, a proportion, and usually quite a large proportion of e-commerce brands, have a direct B2B component within them. Now, this is either in the form of acquiring new retailers to stock their product, encouraging increased demand in existing retailers, or selling directly to corporate-based customers. In this video, I'll be going into selling to corporate customers. Now, the contents of the videos, we'll talk about segmentation of campaigns. We'll then dive into a data-driven approach, and we'll finish off by quickly touching on offline conversion tracking. Now, this whole video will be through the lens of two beauty brands that we work with that both have 60% plus of their new customer acquisition coming from businesses that are buying from them. So it is that B2B component. And these two beauty brands combined together do well over 8 figures per year. Now, I do want to make something clear with both of these brands, which is that B2B customers don't have dedicated accounts. They purchase directly through the eComm store. And if a business name is associated with the order, then the customer support team reaches directly out to them and provides them with a 10% ongoing discount that they can use to encourage them to repeat buy if they believe that they are a business. Firstly, I want to start off with consolidation, particularly on Google Ads. We will always prefer consolidation as it is directly proportional to performance. And the reason why this is the case is because smart bidding strategies have learning models at the campaign, ad group, and ad level. And so what this ends up meaning, if you're running, for example, 4 shopping campaigns that are running smart bidding strategies, this could be 4 performance max, 4 search campaigns, it doesn't matter. And each have varying conversions that are being tracked on a 30-day basis. What's happening here is all of these campaigns are being siloed into their own customer models that are being generated based on the conversion data set. So this campaign up the top here will generally be the best performer as it has the highest conversion turnover, which is going to yield to the best data set to then create a model off to know how to bid adjust moving forward in time to your precise target demographic. What ends up happening is if you take these 4 campaigns and you consolidate them down into a single campaign, you now have a single campaign with 100 conversions a month. So what almost always ends up happening is that when you take 4 split out campaigns and you consolidate them down, you get better performance. So we always recommend doing so, except in the case of where you have a B2B component within a D2C brand. There's a clear exception here, and the reason why we recommend segmenting is because number one, you're going to have different customer profiles. The customer profiles and psychographic data points of a business owner is going to be very, very different from an end consumer. And so having the data sets segmented here does make sense for performance. Number 2 is delineation of data for media buyer analysis. We do not want all of the data within a single campaign as it's going to make it very hard to determine what's performing. Is the B2B component performing or is the D2C component performing? We really don't know as it's all combined within that one campaign. Now, this also cross-translates over to any other digital platforms, including Meta. The second key component here is having a data-driven approach. Both of these beauty-based brands that we worked with, one truth held strong. And that's that ROAS on the B2B based campaigns was about 30 to 40% lower comparative to the D2C campaigns that were running once we segmented these campaigns out. So the initial conclusion that you would draw here if you're looking directly in platform is that we should just increase spend on the D2C based brands and we should pivot and really focus the attention of the entire business on the D2C component, as that's where we're seeing the best returns through advertising. But if we take a deeper look into the metrics, firstly, first purchase contribution margin is better on D2C. 60% on D2C, 30% on B2B. Okay, so it's looking promising for D2C. Average order value is slightly higher on B2B, so we need to now look at lifetime value, which is also slightly higher on B2B. But once you average all of these numbers out, the D2C brand, the D2C unit economics is still looking considerably better. So we could still draw the same conclusion back here that we should just be focusing on the D2C side of the business. And this is exactly what these business owners were doing. They already knew these metrics. They knew that D2C looked better. And so they were optimizing towards it accordingly. but they weren't actually looking at the data. And that's a really important distinction here, is that you can look at metrics that are provided to you within a dashboard, but if you don't understand the levers behind the metrics, and if you don't understand how the data is being aggregated, collected, and then analyzed, you aren't able to make educated decisions. So let's look at the actual data. When we look at first purchase contribution margin, the brand wasn't adjusting for shipping rates and SKUs. And now I want to get a little bit more specific here, and I'll have to move my camera around so you can see the right side of the screen, which is the average D2C order was taking a loss on shipping fees. And that's because the shipping rate that was charged at checkout was less than the shipping cost to the business based on the average item that was being shipped, as well as the average order value. Comparatively, the B2B products were actually positive on the difference between shipping rate and shipping cost to the business. And so they were actually making money at checkout by charging more for shipping than it was costing them. The second component here is that the B2B contribution margins, they were basing these numbers that were reported to us based on the desired top selling SKUs. Okay, these are the top selling SKUs that we really focus on for B2B brands that B2B brands would buy. And so they aggregated their data accordingly. But it wasn't based on the actual top selling SKUs, the actual SKUs that were in the highest volume going towards B2B and D2C based brands. And so when you adjust accordingly, we actually found that the B2B margins were closer to 40% and the D2C margins were closer to 50%. Now onto average order value. With the average order value metrics, these were just really being pulled directly out of the back of Shopify with a little bit of segmentation based on individual product SKU, knowing that some products leaned more towards B2B based orders and some products leaned more towards D2C based orders. But they weren't looking at AOV cohorts and they weren't adjusting for outliers within the dataset. There was also zero consideration on first average order value versus returning. So once you adjusted for median average order value, which generally adjusts quite well for taking out outliers within the data set, what we found was that the B2B orders had an average order value of 340 and D2C was 220. So once again, it's starting to look even more favorable towards B2B. And then lastly, on lifetime value, D2C lifetime value was overinflated by business owners not actually putting a business name at checkout. And because all of this segmentation of data was based on the fact that businesses would put a business name at checkout. If that was not done, they would get counted as a D2C customer, when in fact they weren't. And so that was also leading to an overinflation in D2C data and an underinflation in the B2B lifetime value. So when we looked deeper into the data rather than the front-end metrics, all of the numbers adjust. We now have nearly the same contribution margins on D2C and B2B. We have significantly better average order value, and we have significantly improved lifetime value on the B2B component. And so when we look at lifetime contribution margin, which is a function of contribution margin across all of the orders in the lifetime of a customer, and we were measuring lifetime value based on 12-month lifetime value, we suddenly have considerably better contribution margins on the B2B component, being 23% higher here. Now, going back to one of the original slides, you might be thinking, well, ROAS in platform was still only 30 to 40% worse on D2C. So this probably evens out, and we might want an even focus between these two lines of acquisition within the business. But that actually isn't true. Now, there's two reasons why. Number one is the brand wasn't segmenting audiences correctly in their retention strategy. So every user was being treated the same. They were receiving the same campaigns. They were receiving the same flows. There was no degree of customization for what a business owner would resonate with, want to see, and then encourage them back to site to purchase versus a consumer. So that change in retention strategy in itself should even further inflate the lifetime value, average order value numbers of the B2B component of the business, as well as potentially the D2C component of the business. However, all the flows and all of the campaigns for both of these brands was really tailored more towards consumers rather than businesses, with the assumption built in from these brand owners that businesses will just repeat buy. They'll need the product again, so we don't need to remind them. But with D2C, with consumers, we need to continue to remind them as they can go to alternatives. But secondly here is the offline conversion tracking component. The largest B2B orders for both of these brands would almost always come from direct reach outs, so form fills or emails or calls. That would then get drafted up in a draft order within Shopify, and those draft orders would go out to the customer to pay. Now, the thing with draft orders is in majority of instances, the draft order will bypass the tracking of Google and Meta. On Meta, it definitely will, as the conversion window is just too long. On Google, it will get counted in the conversion window, but generally speaking, it won't contain the same cookies, as they won't be processing on the same browser. And or if they're using enhanced conversion tracking, which references first-party data against the first-party data that Google has on the user, that information usually won't be the same, as they'll be checking out with a business email address, but they'll be using Google with a personal email address. So the tracking here gets very, very sketchy and normally doesn't follow through. And so what ends up happening is the largest orders aren't getting attributed to our B2B-based products and our B2B-based campaigns, which is resulting in lower attributed revenue in platform. So not only are the unit economics better on B2B, but the ROAS is better once we attribute the offline conversions that are coming through draft orders. And so the solution here on one of the clients was we set up offline conversion tracking. It made more sense in their particular instance. For the other client, it made more sense to begin orientating towards MER and CAC. So we started looking at acquisition MER by the B2B component of the business and the D2C component of the business, which is very easy to do. You're just looking at new customer revenue as a proportion of ad spend dedicated to B2B campaigns and D2C campaigns, and you can generate reports segmenting top-line revenue based on the business owner putting a name in or through manual segmentation. There's a lot of different options there as to how you can filter that data and get accurate live reporting for acquisition MER broken down by the two components of the business. So just to recap, we went through the importance of segmenting campaigns when you do have a separate B2B component within a D2C brand. We went through how you need to have a data-driven approach rather than a metric-driven approach, as normally the front-end metrics that you get given isn't aggregated through clean data and doesn't directly show you the levers on the back end that influence those metrics. And then lastly, we talked about offline conversion tracking and how you need to reorientate tracking either towards offline conversion tracking to supplement the orders that aren't being tracked correctly due to draft orders going out, or alternatively, you need to reorientate your KPIs and your campaign performance towards acquisition MER broken down based on the B2B and D2C component of the business.